Our final honoree for the night asked me to keep his introduction short, and so I told him as long as he takes his time speaking to us and tells us what's on his heart and what's on his mind and what he's involved in, what's important for us to hear, then I will keep it as short as I can. Congressman Andre Carson is one of two Muslims in Congress, and he's one of the few members in Congress who comes from a law enforcement background. He brings a level of expertise that few have, which has been recognized through his appointment to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Representative Carson has an eye on our nation's future and has been extremely welcoming to youth, as it was mentioned earlier, and whose approach is to bring the resources of the nation to the young people so that we will have a truly rich future. He has successfully advocated for his constituents in introducing numerous pieces of legislation, promoting small businesses, reducing recidivism, and improving our nation's infrastructure. He does not hesitate to speak out on issues that affect the nation at large, such as diversity and really combating combating Muslim bigotry or anti-Islamic rhetoric. He's been a strong advocate for improving our nation's transportation infrastructure. He's a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and he has authored many bills that help his district and the nation. He's been a supporter to end food deserts in many of our communities, and his theme is delivering hope to those who have been hopeless. The importance of Representative Carson's being the first Muslim on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence cannot be minimized or overlooked, as the intelligence community heavily focuses on issues that are inspired by ISIS or that type of extremism. To have a Muslim and a former law enforcement officer on that committee offers a unique and valuable perspective. He understands that the future of Muslim Americans will be well served when we serve the best interests of not only Muslims, but the best interests of Americans and really the best interests of humanity. I present to you Representative Andre Carson. The only man that didn't need steps to get up here.
Thank you, Imam Pleeman. Thank you so much.
Can I give it to you first so you can take your time?
I think they're ready to go home, brother.
No, they're ready to hear you.
All right.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Take your time, sir.
Thank you, beloved. Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Now that you all are ready to go home, they wanted me to make a few remarks, and I appreciate that Imam Pleeman is on the board because not only is he Ivy League educated, but he is a legend in the South. He's a great legend, particularly in Atlanta. And the work that was done decades ago, we're still benefiting from the fruits of that labor. He made a note to say that I, former police officer, currently a reserve deputy with the Sheriff's Department, but it wasn't always that way. At the age of 17, I was arrested, and I was charged with fleeing, battery on a police officer, and resisting arrest as a young man outside of a mosque. And at that time, I knew enough to know that those officers who not only called us out of our names did not have probable cause to come into that place. And at that time, I was 17, And in Indiana, if you were a juvenile, they couldn't release you from the juvenile center on the weekend. It happened on a Friday night. And I was awakened in the morning, and the head of the facility said, these folks in the parking lot will not leave until they see that you're okay. So they brought me to this window, and I saw a sea of pastors, Christian pastors. I saw a sea of some of the God body, 5%ers. I saw a sea of the mighty FOI and MGT. I saw a sea of citizens who were concerned about the injustice that took place, and that fueled me to want to become a part of the solution by being a police officer as well. I was more concerned about what my grandmother was going to say than any police officer. Have to give a shout out to my brother Salam, all the way here from the West Coast. We appreciate Brother Salam. That's my brother. Good man, good to see you, man. I was glad to see you up there with Hillary. You did a good job. To Hoda, she always does a good job. Always good to see her. I think she's walking around with her baby. To the mini Janet Jackson from Good Times and Facts of Life, Riham Osman. The princess from the Kingdom of Kush, also known as Sudan. Secretary Perez, of course, Ben Rhodes, who's no longer here, Judy Chu, Javier Becerra, and my good friend Don Byer. We had a great press conference earlier. I want to thank you guys for this honor and privilege. I often say, as much as I love the other groups, CARE is the definitive article, or one of my favorites, not only because of the face that CARE presents for the community, but I think when it comes in terms of messaging and being succinct and lobbying legislators and dealing with the machinery that is known as Hollywood, CARE does one of the best jobs in the Muslim community in terms of presenting a positive face for what we represent. So thank you, CARE, for that. MPAC, damn it. MPAC. Wrong event. Everyone knows I love MPAC. I like CARE too. All right? Now, every time I go to a CARE event, I'm on Fox News. But I love MPAC. Thank you, Brother Imam. I love MPAC. I'm affiliated with two MPACs, this MPAC and another MPAC in town. But I love MPAC because the other description didn't fit CARE. Now, if you're in a bind and you want to call some attention to your issue, you call CARE. And you're going to get the attention you deserve and the attention you anticipate. But you'll get attention and you'll get advocates because CARE does that job. But MPAC, you know what? I talk all the time about the advocacy that Muslims have in our community. And we love all that is great about our community. But I think MPAC does a great job, and as Emerge, and you have all these other groups. I was just telling the folks at the table, Sarah Saeed's there, and we have a phenomenal, I was telling the attorney Stith with Homeland Security that a lot of times when we lobby Capitol Hill, there are different interests at play. And if you don't know the community and you aren't familiar with our mores and culture, many legislators have been taken aback. But the best reports that I get from some of my colleagues come from those who have worked with MPAC. Because of MPAC's advocacy and the fact that they have sisters represented when they go to see members of Congress, when they see a Hoda, when they see a Riham, when they see everyone associated, and Salam does a yeoman's job. when they see the representation, professionalism, a thoughtfulness, a depthness in terms of knowing the concerns and legislative agenda, they do the best job. And I think that MPAC is a model for other Muslims to look at. Now, I know that there are competing interests, but sometimes, especially in Islam, competition is good. But I want to tell you to keep up the good fight. You're doing a phenomenal job, and I'm with MPAC. I know I'm cool with the others too now. I'm still getting heat from a PAC check I took in '08 from CARE, so I don't want to hear anything. No, I'm kidding. But 200 years ago, Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men shall be free to profess, by argument, to maintain their opinions as it relates to matters of religion. Now, knowing this, we all know the history of Thomas Jefferson. It's no surprise that one of his proudest moments was crafting a religious freedom law for Virginia that de-established the Anglican Church. I talked about this earlier. Now, Jefferson knew what many of us already know. The United States has been at its worst when our religious freedoms are simply in jeopardy. We've seen the burning of Catholic churches, the attempts to force even Jehovah's Witnesses to salute the flag, which is contrary to their faith. We've seen the attempted extermination of some of our Mormon friends, parts of Missouri and other parts of the Midwest. But all of that isn't completely behind us as we see what's taking place today. Now, I know I can't politicize this event, but I am a politician. And I think in some ways we are seeing history repeat itself. Many of you in the room, understandably so, are feeling the burn. Some of you are trying to walk faithfully up that hill. That's right. And some of you are independent thinkers. You like real estate moguls, and you like folks who own casinos, and you like folks with funny kind of hair who don't like Muslims. But that's your prerogative. But I want you to think very carefully about who will be the next leader of our great nation. We've seen candidates very explicitly cast aspersions on our great faith. They've said that Islam hates America. They've suggested that increasing surveillance on American Muslims is the patriotic thing to do. They want to stop Muslims from overseas into coming in our country. Now, I think that argument works against them. Yes, they're speaking to a certain segment of our population who's disillusioned. And they say they want to make America great again. But when you listen to them, it sounds like they want to make America hate again. And we can't allow that kind of bigotry. Those attacks are not only baseless, it's a call to action in terms of what we must do. It's a call to action to everyone in this room who, in the comfort of our masjids, in the comfort of our own homes, we intellectualize the issue. We talk about the issue with the kind of pomposity and self-righteousness that it doesn't require us to get out and do something to change the condition of our community because we are under attack. Yes, it's great to have our friends in the White House here, and the sisters who work for the White House who are here don't get the credit that they deserve. We love that. But we cannot be satisfied at politicians who court us when their poll numbers are tight. We shouldn't be satisfied when someone who is seeking public office makes blatant statements against our community, because the global community understands that Muslims are critical to the fabric of our society, as evidenced by our friends in the UK with Mayor-elect Khan. That is the kind of progress that we seek to look for. You know, I often talk about the great struggle or struggles that we've had in this country. And the fact that we've been able to overcome those struggles has been because we have been effective at coalition building. MPAC is masterful at brand building and coalition building. If you look at the history in our country that I often talk about of slavery and the push to emancipate the slaves, who the global community spoke out against America's collective hypocrisy because of this notion of slavery. But it was folks like Frederick Douglass who paired with white brothers and sisters in the abolitionist movement to force the president to do and the states to do what the Congress refused to do. So he ultimately, with the help of many states, signed an executive order to emancipate the slaves. It was the movement on the ground that pushed the pen of President Harry Truman to issue an executive order to desegregate the military. It was the same movement on the ground led by Dr. Martin Luther King and A. Philip Randolph and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and Fannie Lou Hamer and others in the Deep South up to the north to force President Johnson to ultimately sign what Congress agreed on in terms of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And even in 2008, when they said it couldn't be done, we joined together as a community, as a multicultural community, to elect the first African-American president, Barack Obama. And now, as we stand in 2015, it's a difficult time to be a Muslim, which is why we're here tonight, and which is why MPAC is so important. We're here to celebrate those from outside our community who stand with us day in and day out, like Javier Becerra, like Judy Chu, like Brother Don Beyer. Each of us, no matter what our religion is, has an obligation to participate in the political process to make a change. I remember, as I often recount, going to the masjid in the 90s, trying to register people to vote. And I heard over and over, astaghfirullah, Salim, oh brother, that is haram. That is haram, oh brother, that is haram, that is forbidden, akhi. And then after 9/11, we realized that we had little to no representation in public life. Brother Keith and I can't do it alone. Mayor Khan can't do it alone. Yes, we have city councilors and legislators, but in 2018 and 2020, we should have an honest conversation about cutting down the numbers of fundraisers we're having for Muslim congressional candidates. We should have a real conversation with the next person in 2020 about which Muslim they're going to pick to be on the ballot with them as their vice president. We should have healthy debates about which Muslim. Is it Brother Salam? Is it Hoda? Is it Riham? Is it Pleeman? Because we've raised millions of dollars, but we've yet to leverage those dollars into real action. We raise money for the Republican Party. We've raised money for the Democratic Party. Keep giving. But we failed to support our own. I told my friends at the DCCC, I said, the most qualified candidates that you have, or that you could have, will come from the Muslim community. In fact, Keith and I do a leadership summit every year. We have another one coming up in 3 weeks. And they list about 10 candidates nationwide who they feel have a chance to win back congressional seats. Not one Muslim is on the list. Hard pressed to get an African American or Latino, that's another subject, but 0 Muslims on the list, and you're asking Muslims to give to support the effort. And when you look in the room, there are engineers in there. They're educators, attorneys, businessmen and women, very successful, millionaires. But they don't think twice about passing us up, going to someone else. We can no longer stand for that kind of relationship with any politician. I think that we should be courted more. Politicians shouldn't be comfortable with taking us to McDonald's and they're taking other people to Oceanair. Now, if you're comfortable with that kind of relationship, so be it. But it's the kind of relationship that has brought us where we are today. MPAC, I want to thank you. I love you. I appreciate you and my faith in you. And I say this very explicitly because all that is great about our community is all that is complicated about our community. And yes, we're critical of one another, but MPAC is the absolute best organization for these times in terms of dealing with the complex issues of imagery. I didn't say civil rights, but that too. When I see a Salam on TV speaking on behalf of the community, I say he represents me. When I hear Imam Pleeman, I say to myself, he represents me. When I see Sister Hoda, when I see Reham, of course, obviously, they represent me. And that representation shouldn't stop with them. That representation begins with you. It doesn't mean you have to be a politician yourself, but it does mean that you have an obligation to serve. I often talk about the conversation that Isa or Jesus had with his disciples in the book of Matthew. And he looked at them and said, "He who wishes to be chief amongst you shall first be your servant." So many people say, well, I want to run for office. I'm smarter than he is. I'm smarter than she is. You may be smart, but your intellect will only get you so far if you're unwilling to serve other people. If you don't have a heart for the people's concern, if you're unconcerned about the indigent, if you're unconcerned about those who are being oppressed, if you're unconcerned about mass incarceration and the growing housing disparities that exist in our country, then you may not be the one who's ready to represent us and serve. Until you have a servant's heart in line with the example of Rasulullah, then maybe we should just support from the background and let those who were born to serve do the job of serving others. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.